Let's talk about silence. I think today's culture, we not only underestimate the value of silence, it's not only just teenagers, anybody and everybody feels uncomfortable when they're silent. And I think it's a disservice to yourself. So let me pause here. This section or this video I'm dedicating to my grandmother, Guru Maharaj's wife, Jia Maa, because every time I think about silence and think about how someone can preach or pass on knowledge or make you feel peaceful in silence without a spoken word, so much can be transferred. It could be a mental state. It could be a state of knowledge. It could be a state of higher consciousness itself. Maharishi Raman, who was a big sage in southern India, who eloquently talked about silence. And he said, speech is actually distracting the real communication. What he meant was that in silence, we are communicating very deeply and effectively. And our vocal language actually disturbs that process. And he goes on and on about the significance and how potent silence is. He says, deep meditation is eternal speech. And think about that, how deep that is. Actually, those who have practiced some meditation, when in deep meditation, they acquire this higher awareness. What is it? It is when you become aware of so many things that you were not aware of. Meditation is a process through which you are able to hear your inner voice. And that, I think he's referring to as eternal speech. So your inner conscience, you're able to bring your inner conscience to a state where that like literally is talking to you in meditation. So it's in a sense, your ability to stop the mental activity is meditation, and that is real silence, he says. So real silence is when you are in deep meditation where mental activity has stopped. And he also says that it is extremely potent. He gives an example of Dakshinamurti, when 4 sages came to him with several queries and no words were spoken, and they went completely satisfied with all their questions being answered with no spoken word used. So he talks about silence is through which knowledge actually appears to you. So Maharishi Raman talks about the significance and the strength of communication through silence. And he says, think about a speech. Sometimes you listen to a speech and then it says, it touched your heart. So he says the communication that touches your heart, think about heart-to-heart speech. In silence, how much stronger that would be. So he says the strongest form of communication is silence. And strongest form of activity is peace. Pretty deep. And he says when you are in silence, you are connected in nature in a whole different way. That you are resonating with nature in the sense that you can, in those circumstances, bring certain powers to play that you would not be otherwise. So he says silence is very, very potent. Then he says that, in form of communication, so if you are, say, you are praying, prayer in silence, which a lot of people do not understand what it is, forget about doing it. But Maharishi Raman said, prayer in silence is the highest form of prayer. And communication in terms of guru teaching the shishya or the disciple, he says the silent discourse is the highest form of a discourse. He says there are initiation ceremonies for guru and disciple where through touch, through eye contact, through other means, guru initiates the disciple. But he says all those are secondary to the highest form of initiation, which is through silence. And he says, think about speech. Something started in the subconscious, then became a thought. Then potentially after that came out the word. So he says the word is the grandson of silence. And hence, if you step back, the real thing, the inheritance that came was through silence. And that is why it is so much important that we figure out how we can utilize those root forces or the sources of that energy to our advantage through silence. And essentially, to sum it up, what we need to think about is silence need not be uncomfortable, need not be something that we completely avoid. When I see in satsangs, when thousands of people sit in silence, you can feel that energy. That collective energy is enormous. I would definitely ask you to experience it yourself. Do not avoid connecting to yourself through silence. Listen to yourself through silence. See more and become aware. A higher level of awareness would come through silence. So let's reinvigorate this very potent tool. As Maharishi Raman eloquently talks about, the most eloquent form of communication is silence. So let's make use of that. Let's communicate and imbibe energy and knowledge and hear to the real self through silence. Thank you.